Hello, welcome. This is a color pencil portrait of an actress you might not know because I didn't know about her. This is Charmian Carr, and the reference is from one of those older classic Hollywood movies, The Sound of Music. Anyway, I picked this reference because I really liked her in this photo. She's very young and very pretty here, and also I like the way she's tilting her head and with a bit of a smirk. The background here is also a bit more complex than in some of my other color pencil drawings because we have this blurry out of focus background, but I'm going to talk about that as we go along. Now let's get to the drawing process. So as you can see here, I started working on the background, and let's talk about the background a little bit first, and then I'm going to talk about the paper, the materials, the usual stuff. So let's say a few words about the background. As for the reference, I'm going to put that in the caption of the video that's going to be attached if you want to examine it. Anyway, as for the background, so this out of focus bouquet background is something, it's obviously taking place in some kind of a garden or something where there are lots of trees and foliage, and these lighter circles are light or daylight or sunlight breaking through the foliage. So this is not that difficult to pull, but the key things are probably blending the colors thoroughly and trying to avoid having too much texture and any specific shapes or details so that you could achieve that out of focus look of the background. Anyway, the pencils I'm using, as usual when I work with colored pencils, are Faber-Castell Polychromos colored pencils. I don't think they're the best out there at all. It's just that those are the ones that I have. They work well for me, and I can buy them individually, which is very important to me. The surface I'm working on is a 1000 grit waterproof sandpaper, cheap stuff that you can buy in a hardware store, but it works well and it's very durable, and it works really well with color pencils and pastel pencils. This is going to be done in colored pencils only, obviously, and obviously, like I said, I didn't know about this actress. It's an older actress, but this is a commissioned drawing because I'm continuing with another series of Hollywood actors and actresses, and this was one of those that I wanted to do, or I was paid to do. And here, like I said, I picked this photo because I really liked it. It's a movie still from the movie The Sound of Music, I think. I hope I'm not mistaken. And she was obviously very young and pretty in this one. As for the drawing process, I should probably say a few words about what I've done so far. There's going to be a lot of contrast between the top part of her head and the background, because the top part of the head, which is where the hair is kind of smooth and slick and shiny, is going to be a lot lighter than some parts of the background. And also there's going to be a bit of a contrast between the left side and the right side of the face, with the right side being a bit lighter. So the light source is normally coming from above, but here it's also coming more from the right. So these are some of the things that you need to be aware of at all times if you want to make a realistic looking drawing, not just a realistic looking portrait, but any drawing. You always have to be aware of the light source and the way it will interact with the objects you're drawing, or the subjects you're drawing. Anyway, I still haven't tackled the hair. I'm putting in some of the darker details on her face, like the eyebrows and the details around the eyes, the eyelashes and things like that, because these are some of the things I like to do, just to put them in place so that the lines that I created when I was doing the sketch wouldn't be lost, and so that I don't have to worry about the proportions later. As for the initial sketch and the proportions, I used a transfer method using some charcoal powder, and that combined with tracing and freehand. So this is a very quick and easy method that some people may not appreciate, but it helps you get right down to the more interesting parts of the drawing process, which is why I like it. So once that was done, I started working on her hair, and in the hair we're going to have a combination of some very dark values and some very light values, some very light highlights. For the darker values I'm going to use some black, some dark sepia, and then some brownish colors, and then for the lighter tones I'm going to use some cinnamon beige and some golden yellowish tones, but I'll get to that later as well. Now she's wearing some kind of headband, I suppose, and the hair, it's holding the hair which is combed or slicked back. So in order to show that shape and the direction of the hair, I will have to pull my strokes, slightly curved strokes, exactly in the direction in which the hair is combed back. And as you can see, now that I've put in some darker details, I'm going in with some lighter values. I put in some walnut brown, and then I'm kind of blending those two a little bit. And after that I'm going to tentatively start adding some lighter details where the hair is reflecting some of that light from the background. So here I used a very light color. This is a light beige, and it's a little bit more reddish than I would want it, but there are ways of making it warmer, I suppose. But here it doesn't really matter, because I want these this part of the hair to be very, very light. So in some parts I even made it even lighter by going over it with a touch of ivory colored pencil, which is almost like a yellowish white, so very, very light. And I don't mind that, because I actually want to create a lot of contrast between those darker parts of the hair, which are tucked in closer to the scalp, closer to the neck, closer to the ear, and which are in the shadow, and those which are sticking out, which are closer to the light source, or which are facing the light source. So this fairly large range of value is a way for me to show the volume and shape of her head, as well as kind of capture the attention of the viewer with those high contrasts. As for the background, you can see that my approach is using a combination of some darker colors, such as, again, some black and dark sepia, and some greens. I'm using a couple of darker greens. I don't know which one this is exactly. It's chromium oxide green or something like that, and then some yellowish permanent olive green, and some others, juniper green. So I have some slightly cooler greens and some slightly warmer greens, some slightly darker greens and some lighter greens, and of course I have those lighter details, those lighter circles. And I mostly did those by putting in some lighter values with a pencil first, and then working on top of them with my blending tools, the blending stumps or tortillons and brushes. But sometimes I can just use one of those tortillons which already picked up a little bit of that lighter color, and I can just drag it on some parts of the background, creating these out of focus lighter effects or light effects, effects of lights breaking through the foliage. And I'm kind of happy with this background. I'm not really going to try to make it any more complex, because the fact that it's blurry and the fact that it has that out of focus bokeh effect is going to make help the viewer focus immediately on the main subject rather than the background, and it's just going to be convincing enough to explain to the viewer where this scene takes place, because it's kind of green, so we know that it's some kind of forest or maybe some kind of a garden, that there are probably some trees and there are some lights coming through the branches and foliage, so that's enough for me to explain what's going on. Now this headband here, as far as I can tell from the reference, is probably made of plastic with some how should I put it, with some darker black and brownish colors, and because obviously it's also a smooth reflective surface, the top part of it, which is facing up, is going to be reflecting some light, so I need to try to find a way to make it look shiny. So now I'm moving on to this part of the hair here, closer to the forehead area, and here the hair is also swept back or combed back, and again I'm trying to follow the direction of the hair, because even though I layer and blend using the blending tools, that initial texture that I'm laying down will still be there. I still intend to keep it, and that's why it's important for me to pull those strokes in the direction of the hair, so that the hairstyle, the way the hair is styled, looks realistic and looks close to what we see in the reference. So I always do a little bit of blending, but not with the purpose of muddying everything or blending everything thoroughly, but just with the purpose of softening those lines just a little bit so that it looks like actual hair. And the reason for that is because you can't really draw every single hair when you draw hair. It's kind of like when you're drawing grass, when you're doing landscapes. So you're not going to draw every single hair, but you're going to draw just enough of them to create something that looks realistic. And when you go over that with your blending tools just a little bit, that'll soften it and give it this illusion of volume and density, and that'll look pretty realistic. Now here I actually already moved onto the face and the skin, and I'm going to start with some darker parts of the face, which is why I used some slightly darker colors first. I started with some reddish brown first for some of the shadow areas, but I'm going to be adding some other browns as well. And as usual, my main colored pencil is going to be the cinnamon. I don't know why, but I just prefer this one when creating skin tones. Of course, I'm going to be adding some pink color, or I don't know exactly which what the designation is in the Faber-Castell range, but here on this top part of the forehead I added a bit of light beige red to create that highlight, or that lightest part of the forehead, and now I'm introducing some of those pinkish tones. Now a lot of people, when they create skin tones, they tend to use a lot more of this pinkish color. I don't know exactly which one it is, I've forgotten, but I tend to add it a bit later, kind of just glazing over some of the colors I already laid down. I have to do a little bit of blending, and I'm doing that with Tortillon now. Now, what this does, unfortunately, is it's actually making everything just a little bit more dull and just a little bit more grayish. That's because as I'm spreading the pigment around, some of the background color is starting to break through at least a little bit. However, the purpose of that is just to spread the colors more evenly and fill in those small tiny spaces, small tiny gaps where I couldn't go in with my pencil, and then I can layer on top of that with some brighter or more vibrant colors to bring back that lively appearance of her skin. Needless to say, this will be a long process because I will be going back and forth trying to decide whether the color of the skin looks right, but also whether the shape of the face looks right, because what's more important than the exact color of the skin, which varies anyway depending on the lighting and the setting, what's more important is of course the range of value and the placement of the areas of lighter and darker value, because it will be this it'll be these relationships between these larger areas of lighter and darker value which will define the topography of the face or the shape of the face and explain it to the viewer. So right now I'm focusing on the left side of the hair. I decided to do a little bit more work here, and to finish that, normally I work from left to right, being a right-handed artist, but I sometimes break that rule a little bit and I tend to go with whatever I find more interesting at the moment, just to break the monotony and the monotony of that drawing process, I suppose, because it can get a little bit boring at times. There are always some parts of the drawing process that are more interesting than others, and there's some parts of the drawing process which are a little bit more repetitive, or maybe they require a little bit more focus and they make you tired a bit faster than others, and then you just want to skip to another part of the drawing, like I did here when I moved on to drawing this eye, because I felt that this was a little bit more interesting at the time. So I added these nice catch lights, which really stand out against this darker background. And now I'm just trying to figure out what to do with the color of her eyes, because honestly I have no idea what the exact color was. I have some older photos and they do appear very light blue or grayish blue, so I added some grayish, bluish and even a touch of green there, but it's mostly bluish. But now I'm also shading the iris, making sure that there is enough contrast between the iris and the pupil and the pupil and the catch light, as well as the iris and the catch light. And of course the whites of the eye, the rest of the eyeball, can't be completely white, so that this catch light would also stand out and make the eye appear more three-dimensional and more lively. Which is why I again used some combinations of beige and grey. And now I'm moving on to this dreaded nose area a little bit tentatively, trying to do a little bit of shading there, and then going back to working on the eye socket area, because I want to finish that first, because you can't really achieve the likeness just by getting the exact shape of the eye or the exact color of the eye. Ultimately it will be the shape of those eye socket, of the entire eye socket areas, and their relationship to the nose area that will determine whether you've captured the likeness of the person or not. So this is a slightly longer video, as you can see, and it's kind of exclusive for now because it won't be available elsewhere. And I hope that you'll like it if you like colored pencils and if you like drawing portraits. I think, or at least I feel like, a lot of people who like my colored pencil drawings tend to prefer landscapes or maybe even wildlife. But I just feel like these colored pencil portraits are far more challenging, and there's also a lot to learn from them. and it's not just an opportunity for you to learn from me, but it's also an opportunity for me to learn from myself and my own mistakes, because as I've always mentioned in many of my videos, each and every one of these drawing videos is also a learning experience for me as well. There are always some challenges. It's kind of like when you're preparing for a drawing, and when you're selecting the pencils, and when you're doing the sketch, it's kind of like laying out the battle plan, and once the actual battle starts, there are always some unpredictable things, and there are always some unpredictable challenges, and a lot of your plans end up not working, and you have to adapt and learn some new things. So that's just the way it is with the drawing process, and maybe that's because I'm not a super experienced artist in terms of my in terms of the length of my drawing career. I suppose I'm a fairly young artist, but maybe when I'm 70 or 80, if I'm still able to draw, maybe then there will be fewer things which will surprise me. Who knows? We can't really tell what the future will bring, but anyway, for now I'm trying to do my best, and also to have some fun and earn a little bit of money doing it. And I'm shading the area around the eyes, trying to capture the appearance of this young beautiful woman, because she was very young when this picture was taken. I have no idea what the movie is about. It's a musical, that's all I know. And another actress that I already drew is also in it, but honestly I have never seen it. I'm not particularly young myself, but this movie was made at least a decade before I was born, or probably more. Anyway, I shaded the left side of the face, and you can see that I used quite a bit more brown there to make it darker, because that's the shadow area. And then, because I felt that it was a little bit too dull, I started adding some slightly more vibrant colors. Now I'm adding this burnt sienna, and I feel like this is making the face a lot warmer and a bit more lively and more realistic, I suppose, because I don't want the colors to appear too cool, because my background is not too cool. So I want to make sure that I stay consistent with that. I have to do a little bit of blending here, I'm afraid, because the thing is that when I work from light to dark, I actually get more texture than when I work from dark to light, and I don't really want that much texture here, because I'm drawing the skin of a young pretty woman, so I want this to look smoother and I want less texture. Obviously there's always going to be at least a little bit of texture, that's unavoidable, but I'm trying to minimize that. And here and there I'm also going in with some brighter colors, like I used that sanguine colored pencil, which is kind of like a brighter orangey brown, I suppose. So I'm making progress with this right side of the face, and now I'm adding the shadow under the chin and the jaw area, trying to frame that part of the face and define that lower part of the face, and to make sure that the face is neither too long nor too wide, before I move on to shading the rest of the face and working on the central part of the face, which is probably going to be more challenging than what I've drawn so far. Anyway, I'm moving on to the this side of the hair, or the hair on the right side, by adding a little bit of shadow in between the face and the right side of the hair, and just adding a bit more value to these long eyelashes. I don't really know if they're real or fake. I have no idea what the makeup trends were back then in the 60s. Maybe she did have those long eyelashes, who knows. Anyway, the part of the face all the way to the left is going to be a very light, it's going to be like a very light line on the right edge of the face, which is facing the light source on the right. So I'm going to make a gradual transition towards that, but this middle area is mostly going to be covered with my base tones, as it were, for which I picked this cinnamon color, and to which I will be adding some pinkish color as well, and adding some darker colors or lighter colors, light beige for the lighter colors, and darker colors such as some different types of browns where needed. Right now I'm working on the lower part of the eye here, adding some lower eyelashes, which will finalize the shape and the appearance of the eye on the right, or her left eye. And after that I can try to define the nose a little bit better, as well as the area, or this transition area between the forehead and the nose, or the eye sockets and the nose. I say earlier I mentioned the dreaded nose area because I feel like this can sometimes be very challenging, because it's very easy to make the nose too big or too small, or to make it too flat. So very careful shading is important here, and you always have to try to push yourself to understand what the exact shape of the face is here in this middle part of the face, because this is a very three-dimensional part of the face, where the nose is kind of protruding from the rest of the face, and there's always going to be a lot of contrast and a lot of range in value there. And if you don't shade the sides of the nose, for example, properly, the nose will end up looking flat and therefore too wide. And if you overdo it with these highlights, which I'm adding in the middle, you will achieve a similar effect by making it too wide. And if you don't add enough, or if you don't add them at all, then maybe you won't get you won't capture that three-dimensional look. Because if you look at the shape of the, or at least the shape of the tip of the nose, it's kind of like a spherical shape, and because it's a spherical shape, it's going to be shaded like a sphere, very similar to the forehead area, with a little bit of catch light somewhere in the middle, or at least where in the part which is closer to the light source, or which is facing the light source. But I think the top part of the face is almost done. I like the appearance of her eyes, and the nose is also looking pretty good. I'm mostly refining the cheeks and the cheekbones. She has very interesting looking prominent cheekbones, and now I'm working my way down towards the mouth and this cheek area where she has these lovely dimples, where I'll also need a bit of contrast in order to show the shape of this part of the face. And obviously, because of the position of the light source, the left side, or the left cheek and the right cheek, is going to appear a little bit different, but I have to shade it in such a way that it makes sense in relation to the light source. I hope you understand what I mean, because the the position of the light makes different parts of the face look different, but at the same time, all of it makes perfect sense to the viewer, even if they don't fully understand what we did there. So what I'm trying to say is that the viewer who doesn't know how to draw will often immediately recognize whether you've managed to capture the likeness of the person, or whether you've managed to describe the topography of the face properly, even though they themselves have no idea what it takes to do that. So I guess my point is that you just have to put a lot more effort and a lot more thought and consciousness into this drawing process than an average person does into evaluating it when they have a look at it. But it's always useful to ask even people who don't know anything about drawing. It's always useful to ask them what they think about portraits or other types of drawings, because they will often give you some insight which you didn't expect, or maybe something that you failed to notice yourself. That's just the way it is. Anyway, I'm kind of trying to wrap things up here with this chin area, but right now it doesn't look quite as I wanted it to look, so I'm making some adjustments in terms of these shadows so that the mouth area wouldn't look too tense and too unnatural. She has an interesting facial expression in this reference, so I'm going to try to capture that. There's a little bit of a smirk on her face, but we'll see how it'll go. Right now I have to do a lot of shading on the lower part of the face, but I can also go back and revisit some other parts of the face if I feel like some of the smaller adjustments are needed there. I decided to add a bit more value to this left side of the nose to add a bit more shadow there, and I think it improved the overall appearance of the face. I'm just adding some more details around the eyes, kind of refining the appearance of those eyelashes and some other things. Basically putting down some finishing touches on the face itself. I'm not really sure where exactly the light source is, because we can see a lot of these lights in the background, but I feel like because the right side of the face, the very edge on the right is so light, I feel like it's definitely coming more from the right side. It's obviously coming from above, but I feel like it's coming more from the right. And I just decided to go back and add some lighter touches on both on that headband and the top of the hair, just to increase that contrast and to make the main subject really pop out against the background. And I'm putting down some final touches on the face using this light beige color, which is kind of adding some more of a 3D appearance to the face. Obviously, even though I still have a lot of work to do on the rest of the body and the hair and the background, every now and then I will be going back and making some minor adjustments to the face as well. And also making some adjustments not just in the shape of the face, but also in the colors of the face, because sometimes if I feel like I need to add a slightly different tone, I will go back in and kind of glaze over that with a pencil. And this surface really allows me to do these things because it can take many layers, and you can also control the way in which you modify the layer underneath. You can kind of just add a slight suggestion of a different color, or you can add some strong details with a lot of contrast. So this surface is very flexible in that respect. Anyway, I have to finish the hair here on the right side, and this is going to be interesting now because this right side of the hair is going to be very light. But before I go on with those lighter parts, I'm just going to lay down these darker parts first. with some black and then some brown, and then a little bit of darker values in the background here, just to prepare the terrain for the highlights so that they would really stand out, because I'm really trying to get the most out of those contrasts. So for the background, I first put down some of these black areas and then a little bit of that chromium green on top of that. I'm going to add some other greens as well, and I'm going to do a little bit of blending. The thing is that with this surface you can achieve a smooth out of focus appearance of the background, but it's not always easy. Sometimes you have to dig in pretty hard with some of your blending tools, and you have to do a lot of blending. A little bit of dabbing with the brush, a little bit of dabbing with different types of brushes. I suppose I'm just trying to figure out which one works best. I mostly use flat brushes, but some of them are harder than the others. And I'm still using this approach of making these lighter circles by using a tortillon which had already picked up a little bit of pigment from another lighter pencil, and that seems to work. Now let's tackle this right side of the hair here, because this needs to be just a little bit warmer in color and much lighter. So I'm going to start with this yellowish color, and of course it's not going to look like that once I finish, but I just want to see what happens if I put in some really warm yellowish tones first. And then on top of that I'm going to put some lighter beige tones to mix that in, and that's going to make it cooler and a bit more reddish, but I'm kind of hoping that some of these warmer yellowish tones will still be there and that the eye will pick up on them. And then on top of that, as a final touch, I will go in with some really light details using an ivory colored pencil, which is much lighter than anything else I used on the hair. The ivory colored pencil is the second lightest pencil I have. I think it's very close to white. Maybe the other thing that is also very close to white is a light cool gray, but other than that, it's one of the lightest pencils. All I have left to do is finish. What is this? It's some kind of a jacket, I suppose, or a coat. I'm not really sure what it is that she's wearing. Anyway, it's kind of a dull yellowish brown color. So I'm mixing in a couple of different colors in there. Some yellowish brown, some ivory on top of that to make it lighter, and some regular browns as well. I use that term mixing in as though I'm painting, but I am actually drawing. I'm not using any solvents whatsoever. But it just feels like on this surface, it feels like it's easier to move the pigment around and it's easier to blend. So it's a little bit more similar to painting, I suppose, than it is on regular paper. I mean, colored pencils on this surface behave a bit more like pastel pencils than they do like regular colored pencils on regular conventional paper, which is why I like this paper. But the advantage of colored pencils is that they are so much more difficult to smudge than pastels and pastel pencils, and fixing is not so much of a problem. And I really don't like when my drawings are not fixed, especially the ones which I tend to sell and ship, because I'm always worried about what will happen if somebody doesn't handle them too gently. And colored pencils on this surface, they actually tend to stick a little bit better. I do use a tiny bit of fixative on top every now and then, and the fixative I use, by the way, is Conte à Paris. It was meant for charcoal and pastels, but I feel like it's better than the Koh-i-Noor fixative I normally use with charcoal and graphite. It sprays in much smaller, finer droplets and covers more thoroughly, and it just doesn't cause quite as much of a change in color because it doesn't make the surface quite as wet if you're careful the way you apply it. Now here is a final decision, one of the final decisions. I decided to add a touch of this pinkish color, and I actually have to check which one it is. I have to check which one it is because it's called Salmon. It's 130 Salmon colored pencil, which I also use on the face a little bit to achieve the skin tone. So I wanted to have a touch of that color on her coat and maybe a few touches here and there in the background as well. So I thought that was a nice final touch to the drawing, and I put my signature in the lower left corner of the drawing, and now the drawing process is finished. So I hope you enjoyed this colored pencil portrait. I put a lot of effort into it, and of course, as usual, I'm going to see you in the next one. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.